All right, so today we're gonna talk, continuing our um, instructions with applying porcelain, and also what makes a case successful, right? It's not just keeping the requirements of the materials. It's not just how we apply the knowledge that we have to um, design and manufacture a restoration, but also understanding how we can use the tools that we have and what kind of tools we use them in the correct way, right? Think about it from the beginning, right? When you pour out the impressions, you're using different materials, you're using stone, using the babblizer, you're using a spatula, using a vibrator, you're using a vacuum mixer, using a dye stone, all these materials, right? Then you move to the next step, which is the waxing, right? So now we're using wax, and then we're using sprues, and then we invest different materials, right? Then if we do a metal substructure, right, we're gonna use dental alloys. We can use high um, noble or noble alloys. We can do base alloys, or we can do all ceramic substructure. And then to achieve a greater success of the case and to um, copy nature, right? We have at our disposal different type of porcelains to match and mimic the natural conditions of the patient. And it's very important for us to understand, especially those materials, the porcelain, the ceramic materials. Why? Because matching somebody's dentition is very hard in terms of the shade and the shape. All right. Sometimes you look at the tooth and you see, oh my God, this tooth, it's a little bit crooked here. It's maybe a little bit rotated. That's the natural way, right? You want to copy that, right? But how I make it look that way, but also to be functional. What happens if a patient has a big diastema, right? And if we close that diastema, then the teeth are wide. They're really big teeth, right? So what we can do, what type of materials, how we can shape and design those contours of the crowns to make them look narrow, but also to be functional, because that's what we want.
With music, Devin Burrs?
Yeah, you can use a lot of, right. We can use a lot of tools that we have at our disposal, but we have to know how we can use it correctly, okay? So that this whole course teaches us how to use the porcelains and also the tools that we can shape the porcelain to give us that natural look, okay? So when we're talking about anatomical contour, in your mind, what you think about it? What a tooth is, right? If we have a molar, you have a person that it's a younger person, right? And you look at their molars. The cusp tips are more pointy. The grooves are deeper, right? The secondary anatomy is there, right? You look at an older person, not that much, right? Some people they're a little bit older, or people that they have bruxism, right? They grind the teeth down, right? Their anatomy is almost gone. So if we have to copy what the patient has, right? We're looking at the anatomy and we copy that. So Anatomical contour relates to the shape of the teeth that we learn in general, right? So we learn how many cusps, for instance, the first premolar had, right? Upper first premolar. What about the how many cusps the first lower molar has, right? We have five, right? So you learned the general shape of the tooth, but now you shape that, you take that general shape and you customize it for the patient, and you customize it for two reasons, right? First and primary reason, it's function. If, like I said, I have a patient that has worn out dentition, right? And I put a crown that has very deep anatomy and all that fun stuff, right? Do you think that that crown is gonna function well? No, it's going to bother the patient and it's going to lead to more problems, including PMJ problems. Okay, so anatomical contouring, it's a very complex notion that deals not only with the shapes that we learn about each tooth, right? That each tooth has a general shape, but how you customize that shape to meet what the patient has. Okay. So adjusting contouring and finishing procedures for metal ceramics or all ceramics restoration play a critical role in achieving both function and aesthetics. This is what we're looking for, right? Function and aesthetics. Function first. Subtle refinements in contouring, surface texture, and surface characterization often makes a critical difference between a, like a general kind of generic type of restoration and an exceptional restoration. What we mean by generic or mediocre. Okay, it's there. Okay, you can tell it's a fake tooth, but it functions well, so the patient is kind of okay with it, right? What's an exceptional restoration? There you go. So there is no difference between natural teeth and what we did.
But if it's for anatomical contouring, is that before or after we apply? So this is after we apply the fake building of the porcelain, and then when we build up the boundaries.
Anatomical contouring can be done, and that's a good question. Either during your build up, right? So when we built up the porcelain, right? Instead of just taking a big block of porcelain and apply it on the coping and make it like a like a square, right? And then you grind it. You actually like the wax up. Take a little bit of the porcelain and just add it where needed to make the shape, right? And then also anatomical contouring means the porcelain shrinks a little bit. So sometimes we adding a little more porcelain because it shrinks. So sometimes we need to adjust the porcelain at the end after we finish, the second bake when we have the majority of the shape done. But now we have to do the function, right? So we're using articulating paper to see where the contact area are, how the contact is, and if we need to grind something. So we're going to talk about all that, all those steps that we need to take. But that's very true. We can take our time to do an exceptional restoration where we cannot tell, or the patient cannot tell which one is their natural teeth and the crown that we did, or a generic crown, which is a crown we did it there. Okay, the patient is like, okay, I have something, I can function with it, whatever. Ideal is for every great case to get to this stage of exceptional restoration. All right, this is our goal. So every time you receive a case, and you look at the case and you map your case in your head, how you're gonna approach the case, how you're gonna do design and everything else, you should kind of have in mind the vision of a successful restoration, not of, okay, I'll go come to be a crown. All right. So this is the idea. Surprisingly, little equipment and few instruments are needed for finishing procedures. And that's true, because the more instruments we're using, first of all, there are certain requirements in terms of each material that we use, right? So for instance, if we're using something to grind porcelain, right? What kind of materials, or what kind of burrs we can use to grind porcelain?
Diamonds?
We can use a diamond. Okay, can we use stones or ceramics?
No, stones will contaminate it.
We can use stones.
Right?
Yeah, we can use stones. For Emacs, for instance, you guys didn't use any stones in your lab to grind? Yeah. So yeah, so the manufacturer now, they make kits with you know, they kind of give you the whole array of stones or diamond burrs that you might use for that procedure, going from coarse to fine, right? So just because a kit has burrs or stones coming from a coarse texture to fine doesn't mean you have to use them. Okay, so if your crown, you look at it and the patient has like a very smooth surface on the teeth, right? Are you going to use something that it's rough and leave a lot of texture on the tooth? No, you want something smooth, right? So selecting what kind of instrument, what kind of tools we're using is very important. And sometimes this comes with experience, you know. Many times you're going to see experienced technicians, right? When I was working in the lab, we used to have the sales representatives from, let's say, we used to buy a lot of birds from Brazil. So our sales representative would come maybe every 2-3 weeks, and he will have a bag full of, you know, samples of different stones and burrs and diamond burrs, carbides, different grid, different shapes, all that fun stuff. So we would pick and choose. And the good thing was those samples of stones that they had, I could try. So if it was something new that I never tried before, I can take one of his, you know, sample burrs and try it on my material, see if I like it. So, or how I can work with it. So, but usually technicians are kind of set, you know, they find something that they like and they work very well with. They're kind of set of what they wanted, you know. So you can customize your kit that you work with, you know, for you and to make your life easier. And you know that you can give a good results to those instruments, those burrs. And like I said, it's always be friendly with your manufacturer representative, because they can tell you this is what's new on the market. Try it. And this is special, especially when the zirconia came out. Who do you think I learned more about the stones and the burrs from to use on zirconia? From the dentist or from those continuing education courses? No, it was from the sales representative, because you know they came and they told us, hey, listen, they did this kit especially for zirconia, and this is the grid, and this is why it works, because it doesn't heat too much. It's a stone that stays cool, so it doesn't transfer heat to the material and all that fun stuff. And they will let us try it, you know. So learn about what's new on the market, try it, and then integrate it into your toolkit.
Next question. So you can only use diamond burrs for you can only use diamond burrs for summits, but you can use both stones and diamond burrs for porcelain because I always heard that any other burrs besides diamond can will just paint or contaminate the porcelain.
Yes, that's true. And like I said, if you remember, I keep talking about, especially if you remember when we talk about metal, right? Always have separate kits for different materials. So if I'm doing Emacs, I will have a set of burrs and stones just for Emacs. If I do zirconia, I'll have a set of stones for zirconia. I'll never mix them, you know, even though they're all ceramics, but their composition is different, right? One it's lithium disilicate, the other one it's zirconia and yttrium. The two different materials. Okay, so if I use burrs for one set of burrs for both of them, they can cross-contaminate. Okay. The more details are included in the porcelain build-up, the easier and faster will be the final contouring and characterization. And this is exactly what I was telling you, right? When we do the build-up in porcelain, instead of just throwing there a lot of porcelain and just make it like a big block of porcelain and then grind it down to shape, it's better to build up little by little and keep in mind the shape that you need to do. It's much easier to work that way. What we need to do, so what we're using in terms of grinding and reshaping to the anatomical contour. So in terms of equipment, we need a microscope. Why do we need a microscope? To see the details. And also, very important, we keep forgetting sometimes like, I'm finished, I have a zirconia crown and I'm building up layering porcelain for that zirconia substructure, right? And I don't think about that substructure, the zirconia coping, it's still there. So through the whole process of building up and recontouring and reshaping and baking, you have to keep in mind that the requirements of those and the parameters of the substructure, okay? Always keep that in mind. So we need a microscope, especially for old ceramics. Sometimes we might have microscopic, um, fixture in there, like a little crack in there. With the naked eye, you can see it, right? So it's good from time to time to stop, take your crown and look at it. See if the porcelain is bonded very well with the substructure, okay? Margins, very important, right? We keep talking about sometimes we do a butt margin where we have only porcelain. So using a microscope, we can see if we put enough porcelain to meet the margin of the preparation, right? Handpiece, right? So we need a handpiece. And the handpiece, we're going to use it from the beginning of the case till the end, right? Because in the beginning, what we do, we use it to cut the dies, to trim the dies, to base the dies, do all that fun stuff. And at the end, we're going to use the handpiece to polish, right? Good. High speed. High speed, it's a good tool to have. Yes.
Okay, wait, so finishing the porcelain is it similar to like polishing like metals?
No, no, it's not, because we're using different tools for polishing porcelain. Okay, so for metal you use a rouge, right? A rouge paste to have that nice shininess on it at the end, right? You can use rouge on a porcelain because it's going to stain, it's going to make it reddish, right? So we have a diamond paste that we can use for polishing porcelain and all ceramics. In terms of the high speed, we have to be very careful in terms of the burrs that we use, right? Make sure that the burrs that you're using are good burrs. They cut really good, okay? And also make sure if your manufacturer recommends to use high speed. I know for Emax and zirconia, it's not recommended to use high speed, especially if you use air, uh, what it says, air driven, right? If you use high speed with water, maybe it's going to work. I don't recommend it. But if you want to be on the safe side and you need to use it, I will use a high speed with water instead of with air because, like I said, zirconia is very sensitive at the changes of temperature. So it gets hot really fast when we use the high speed and it cracks right away and you cannot repair it. So you have to start all over again. Um, and also a vacuum. So the vacuum is mostly for the ovens, you know. What kind of instruments we can use? So we can use gauges to measure the thickness, right? And this is very important. Like we saw when we built up the porcelain, we built up in layers, right? So we starting with opaque, and then we put in the body porcelain or the dentin, and then we put in the incisor, and maybe we can add different other porcelains to give the effect that we want, right? So we're going to use a lot of different porcelains. Don't forget one thing, each manufacturer that told us there is a ratio that we have to keep between the dentin porcelain and the incisor porcelain and also the thickness, right? How much thickness we need for the porcelain to look natural, right? If the porcelain is too thin, right? So maybe we don't have 1.5 millimeter, maybe we have 1.3 or 1, right? There are some porcelains that if we don't apply enough dentin, it looks dead. The value is really increasing. So it looks grayish, it looks opacious, it looks like a dead tooth. And it's not, it doesn't have that translucency that like an actual tooth. So maintaining that ratio of porcelains in build-up is very important. Um, so we talk about cross-contaminations. We talk about that also the speed influences the properties of the materials, right? Um, Flexible diamond discs for shaping, contouring, interpart, proximal area of the bridges. So we have, like I said, a lot of um, tools, a lot of burrs that can help us um, with a anatomical contour, reshaping, right? Redefining. Like always at the end, after you finish building up your crown, and you look at it and you're like, okay, it looks good, right? I'm ready to move to the glaze phase, but maybe I just want to redefine a little bit of anatomy. So this is the time when you can do it. What burrs are you using for that? So for that, maybe you want to use a very thin and fine diamond burr, like a flame shape, just to go in there and open up the grooves a little bit, you know, so make them look more natural. Because sometimes if you look at some of the um, way some technicians design a groove. A groove for them is just like a scratch. They take an instrument and they just cut a line into it. That's not a groove. Okay? A groove is like a valley, right? It goes up and down and it's rounded on the side. It's more like a V instead of just like a chunk.
So do we just like using the bird to like to make the
Redefine the anatomy.
the grooves, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right.
yeah.
Like you think of one like the shape of the bird, like when we define the anatomy, when you use like specific shapes of birds.
Yes, you can use specific shapes and also you can use specific grades. So you can use coarse, medium, or fine, all right? So it's up to you which one you're gonna use, right? So the rule is you start with the coarse and then you go towards the fine, right? So we can see here, especially those are the green stones. And we can see we have different shapes, right? To help us. This big one, we can use it for cutting, let's say the spruce and, bulk reduction, right? This we can use to contour more on the cusps, right? And these two, we can use it more on the occlusal surfaces where we have to maybe redefine the triangular ridges and the marginal ridges a little bit, okay? So all these burrs, they're going to help you to contour, to not only contour, but also give that characterization, right? Some, think about it this way. Some patients may have a very round, especially a female patient, on the centrals, they have a very round distal, right? So how you do that? What kind of burr you can use to make it round but not sharp, right? Because if you take a burr and you start cutting, you make it round, but it's going to be sharp. So you have to roll in the surface. So what kind of burr you can use for that? Yeah, I mean, there are different burrs, so you have to learn which one gives you that advantage.
So say if you want to make, what do you use like a bird to redefine like anatomy like grooves or like grooves? You use like a sharper edge burr.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
to get the gap between the grooves.
Yeah, the only thing, that's why I said, for redefining the anatomy, like the grooves and stuff like this, I will use a very sharp burr, new burr. If you use something that it's a little bit older and start kind of like, trying to get in there, it puts more friction on the material, right? So if you have something new that works faster and cuts better, use that one.
What happens if you use like a always what does coarse, fine, and like the texture have to do with it, like coarse and fine? Coarse and fine.
Because you start with the course, right? So when you redefine your anatomy, right? Let's take the example, you cut the sprue. How you cut the sprue? You use a diamond burr, right? Use a diamond burr, you cut the sprue. I'm talking about ceramics, right? And then you use what? You use the greenstone to bulk reduce, yeah, right? That area. And then to reshape it, right? So now I have to reshape that curvature of the cusp, the cusp tips, the incline plane, the line angle, right? What I can use for that? Well, I can use either a flame shape stone like this, and I start from a material that is coarse, right? And then I move towards the fine, right? Because even though we don't see it like we see it on the metal, when we start with the coarse burr, it leaves scratches, right? We don't see it very much on, old ceramics, but they're there. All right, so again, different type of discs, okay? Now, some discs, and again, you have to customize yourself with what your manufacturer of burrs, the supplier gives you. And you may have multiple suppliers, not only one. Maybe you like the disc from one company, the carbides from another, and this one from another. Who knows? But keep in mind the discs, they come in different thickness. They might have one or both surfaces abrasive, meaning the diamond coating. Okay, they might be flexible, so they might be very thin and they can flex. Okay, and also the diameter. They can be smaller or they can be larger. Okay, in terms of the carbides, and this is a good example. You see this carbide here has a green color. So each manufacturer, they have them color coordinated for diamond burrs, for carbide burrs. Doesn't matter the shape. So I can have it in this shape, I can have it in this shape, right? But they're all color coordinated. And you have to learn their color coding because they're not the same from manufacturer to manufacturer. So from some of them, they say, okay, yellow for me, it's the coarse, and maybe purple is the finest, right? So they go from yellow to purple, maybe they have red in between, whatever. So you see multiple, it's the same shape, it's the same diamond burr, but if you look at it and you feel it, one is coarse, one is finer, okay? It's the same for the carbide burrs, okay? So you're gonna see that some carbide burrs also they have this color coordinated. So how we know where to grind? So I don't know if it happens to you when you retrieve your crowns um, from pressing, right? And then you put a crown in your model. And then you take articulating paper and you start doing the contact. Did you see that between your wax up and your final Emax crown was a difference? What was the difference? Okay. What about that? That was the crown with porcelain buildup, right? What about the crown that was full contour?
Like I used to carve not to carve, but like the details, but after baking, it isn't, it kind of blending.
Always, for some reason, and that's the Emax properties. After you press it and you put it back, you did a perfect wax off. You check your occlusal contacts before pressing, right? Always you have to adjust it after pressing because the material is a little bit thicker. Okay, so just because you did a perfect wax off doesn't mean the final restoration. If it's a monolithic restoration, it's going to be perfect. You still have to check. So how we check this? We can use articulating papers, right? And also we can use markers. So this is more like a paste that you can paint, and then where the mark is, you grind only in that spot, all right? So let's talk about how we use the articulating paper, right? Let's think about it. You know, what the dentist does. The dentist puts the crown in with temporary cement. It doesn't permanent cement it. So he's just trying in the crown, right? And then it takes articulating paper and he asks the patient to bite down, right? So bite down and rub, rub, rub. So rub, rub, rub against the articulating paper, right? And then it tells the patient, okay, open up your mouth, and then he sees or she sees where he needs to grind. He can do it if there are minor adjustments. He can do it right there in the patient's mouth. Okay.
Wait, so, so like, after you make the porcelain, after you make the porcelain, and you want to finish it, you put the artist spot first, so the scratches and so scratches will be more defined.
Yeah, you have to grind it, excuse me, in occlusion and also the contact, right? Don't forget another thing. Let's say the patient where maybe a temporary restoration for a longer period of time, right? What happened with the natural teeth?
The bone is healed.
The natural teeth, they move a little bit, right? So many times it happens, like to me, in the model, the contact was good. And then when I give it to the doctor tries in the crown and he comes back to me, he was like, oh, the contact is open. Can you add a little bit of porcelain? Sure. It's nobody's fault. It's not his fault. Doesn't mean he took a bad impression. It's not my fault. Doesn't mean I didn't go with crown. It's just that sometimes if the patient has a lot of mobility in the natural teeth or the patient wear temporary for a longer period of time, the natural teeth may move a little bit. So that's why it's very important to check this, right? To check the occlusal and interproximal contact. What else we want to check at this stage? For the patient to be able to clean. What else?
Which after the fissure is that
the embrasures, especially the gingival embrasures. The patient has to be able to put proxy brush or floss to clean there, right? So those are important areas that we have to look. Also, when we do the adjustments, occlusal contacts, right, especially incisal contacts, anterior guidance, right? What kind of movements we do in the articulator?
centric, lateral, retrusive.
How we do that? If you use a semi-adjustable articulator, how we do all the movements? What we need to do? Unlock, yeah. Unlock the articulator. Make sure you have the anterior guidance set up, right? And then you can do. What happens if we do a crown and we adjust the occlusal just by the vertical dimension, just by the patient biting up and down?
I mean, it'll be like, correctly. You want to account for like the
lateral movement.
Yeah,
But what happens? Yeah, what happens if we don't do that?
Basically, the cuts will it'll be difficult for any lateral movement if you just account for like only vertical,
Okay. So what could be? Okay. So what are some of the consequences?
It might come off.
It'll break in.
Break what?
Like the crown.
It would break the porcelain. What else?
I mean, it could break the
Think about the
porcelain because-
opposing, right? How is the porcelain strength versus the natural dentition?
It's harder.
Right. So what's going to happen to the opposing? Okay. So that that process, it's speeded up a little more, right? So we have to understand that we have all these tools at our disposal, to correct the function, but we have to know how to correct it, right? It's not just having the tools. If you don't know what to do with them, okay, it looks nice that you have them. It doesn't mean too much, right? So it's very important to see and to understand where the contacts should be, all right, on each tooth. And you learn this in tooth morphology, right? Okay. So this is the version of our first manual talking about anatomical contouring, and it takes us to the same idea that we talk about it, using different tools to do characterizations, right? So we see here, like in picture G, where it shows us how we can put mamelons, if we want to. If we look at picture D, where we have this groove here, we can add the groove in there. Also, sometimes as beginners in this profession, we tend to kind of overdo some of this stuff, right? Because you think about it, oh, there is a groove in there. I gotta go in there. Excavate, make it deeper. And then it looks like, wow, the patient has a cavity in there, right? So always subtle, right? Everything is very subtle. So do a little bit. And how you check? Let's say you are in your porcelain phase. You finish building up the porcelain. You grind it. Your porcelain is not shiny because you didn't polish it and you didn't apply, your glaze. So it has that matte look, dull look, right? And you put a groove in there, and you're like, because of the texture and the look of the porcelain, you can see very well that groove. How what you can do to make that texture pop.
For the thing, like you.
Before you're doing the characterization now, you just redefine your anatomy. What I used to do, I would dip my finger in water and put a little bit of water on the surface. So it acts like, how is it, in the mouth with the saliva. And then I see, oh, okay, maybe I need to, make the groove a little deeper because I can see it too much if I apply the glaze, right? So, those are things that you find out doing it, from experience. So, establishing the overall contour. Again, we talk about this, what we looking for in terms of the contour and especially the function. We start about talking about the function and then we move towards aesthetics, right? If a patient has characterization, texture, right? Some people, especially younger people, if you put your finger on your tooth, right? If you dry out your tooth a little bit and you put your finger on your tooth, you feel that you have a little bit of, besides, your mamelons and whatever, you feel like you have a little bit of texture in there, a little bit of roughness, right? So you have to be careful when you do a crown and you see that the patient has that texture, not only to put the texture in the tooth, but also when you put the glaze, that glaze is going to cover that texture. So maybe you want to texture it a little more. So when you put the glaze on, you know what I mean? It kind of gives you that illusion of texturing. All right. So it says here, precision grinding of the incisal edge and embrasure form, it's an absolute must. And this is very important in terms of aesthetic when we're talking about anteriors. Why? Because we have to copy, you know, that's what gives us the shape, right? Remember I said if a patient has a more rounded distal, how we do that, right? If you leave that distal more square, and it might be just something minuscule, right? Very, very, very minute. The eye is going to go and pick up that little mistake instead of seeing the whole foot, okay? So, and again, with the embrasure, especially for the anterior teeth, why is this important, gingival embrasure? Gingival embrasure. Why is that important? Aesthetic. If maybe I'll find it and I'll give it to you. There is the golden rule. I don't know if you heard about the golden rule, okay? Where the golden rule says that everything has to be in proportion. So the golden rule says that if I take my finger and make a ratio between my finger and my palm should be 1.6 of my finger, right? So this golden rule also applies to the smile. So the length of the teeth, the width of the teeth, the length of the gums, how much the patient show when they smile, right? So some people, we say they have a gummy smile because they show a lot of gum, right? And you look at it, it's not pleasant, right? Some people, they don't show any gum. But some people also, when they smile, right, they show a lot of black area here. I know I'm making faces, but I'm making faces so you can remember, right? If I don't make those faces, you're not going to remember what I'm saying. So those areas, when people smile, sometimes it's not that they don't have teeth; they have teeth, but the teeth are narrow. The arches are narrow, so there is a space between the cheek and the teeth, and that's called a negative space, and it looks like a black space. Also, when we do the gingival embrasures, right? If we don't take into account also how much space we can leave, we need to have that space for cleaning, for the proxy pressure plus. But also, if we make it too big, we're going to have that black triangle, and the tooth is going to look funny, right? So it's that golden ratio that we always have to keep in mind, especially for the anterior cases. All right. So this is, again, more about symmetry, and this is very important because we're trying to look at and achieve harmony, right? This is what we're trying to achieve. Harmony in terms of materials, what kind of materials we're using to, restore the patient's smile, and also in terms of the function and aesthetic. Everything is harmony. Okay. So if we need to repair porcelain, what can we do? We can use a low fuse porcelain to repair it. All right. And again, low fuse porcelain, right? It has a low temperature, baking temperature. So we cannot add too much. Low fuse porcelain sometimes means that if we add too much, we use a program like the second bake, therefore all the porcelain is going to shrink, right? So it's good to know, but also we have what's called an add-on porcelain that we can use without the vacuum, and it doesn't shrink that much, right? And that's about it. Any questions?
I have a question. It's by the final cell, okay? So basically, it said the volunteer will be on week 15.